Hi everyone, CJ here. Welcome to the 8th and final episode of the Water Margin Summarised Series. In the previous episode, we covered how the Liangyan bandits fully assembled their 108 Stars of Destiny and fought tooth and nails to gain full pardon from the Emperor. But their trials are not over yet, because on this episode, they will work towards their atonement by fighting the enemies of the state. For historical and cultural context, I will also talk about redemption in Chinese culture. Before I start, let me remind you that we've got these cool shirts and merch for the series. These characters say, "Within the four seas, all men are brothers," a commonly used slogan in the novel. You can support what we are doing by getting these goods from the link below. Alternatively, you can also support us on Patreon, or make one-off donations by using the Super Thanks button or Coffee. "No, you are not going to break us up," Song Jiang objected. The imperial court tried to reassign the former outlaws to different posts. To be fair, this is a rational course of action, since it would reduce the risk of rebellion. But that would also make them vulnerable to the schemes of the four evil ministers. That's why Song Jiang just can't let them do that. But the ministers had expected this reply. So they urged the emperor to have Song Jiang and his rebellious men executed for treason. As Emperor Huizong wavered, the good minister Su Yuanjing alerted the emperor of the ongoing Khitan assault on their northern provinces. Rather than fighting a civil war, wouldn't it be wise to send Song Jiang and his men to fight the Khitans instead? He advised. Yeah, let's do that. The emperor agreed. Alright, the Liangyan heroes are off to war. It is lights off for the mountain headquarters because they're off to do the heaven's will, defending the country by murder and mayhem. I think it is important to mention that Song Jiang and the other Stars of Destiny are not cleared of their sins or bad karma yet. The amnesty just gave them the opportunity to start working towards it. Compared to the Western sensibility, which is strongly influenced by Christianity, the Chinese have a more practical view of atonement. They can only redeem themselves through work and merit. Judicially, the East and West were quite similar. Criminals are fined and punished. But spiritually, Christian Catholics emphasized more on the acts of confessing the sin and accompanied it with good work. Christian Protestants, on the other hand, emphasizes more on the faith in God for redemption, sola fide. But of course, this is a bit of a generalization. There are nuances even among the different denominations within those divisions. In Chinese tradition, redemption is usually earned through work, 将功赎罪, to repay sin by merit. To repay sin by merit is a commonly recited Chinese phrase. If you are Buddhist, then you can offset the bad karma by gaining good karma. There are repentance ritual and confessions, but their purpose is only to facilitate meritorious act. But of course, different traditions consider different things to be meritorious. In some Buddhist sects, even reciting sutra can be considered as meritorious act. As for Taoism, originally, they didn't have the idea of sin, but some religious Taoists had borrowed the Buddhist concept and developed similar beliefs. Look, the writer of Water Margin was probably not a theologist, okay? So he would probably have a more generalized idea that Song Jiang and the rest need to redeem themselves through service. But then, here comes the dilemma. During their march, one of their men discovered that a corrupt official was stealing their provisions, so they killed him in the heat of the argument. This obviously was a grave offense. Song Jiang had no choice but to execute the offender, his own men, to show responsibility to the government. This was the first time he had to harm his own people. For his loyalty to the country, he had to start sacrificing his principles of brotherhood. With the full constellation of 108 stars on his side, the Khitans were no match for Song Jiang. But Song Jiang's greatest trial would not be fought on the battlefield. it will be fought in his heart and mind. The Khitan Liao Dynasty court sent him an offer to join them. Why would heroes like Song Jiang want to serve the corrupt Song dynasty anyway? The Khitan envoy asked. The Song dynasty court is controlled by corrupt officials. They did not even give them real official titles. Even if they won the war, their achievements will be diminished by the corrupt officials. And if they were to protest, they would be branded as criminals all over again. The Liao Emperor, on the other hand, appreciated their talents and promised them hefty rewards and important titles. The envoy was right on the mark. Song Jiang made some excuses to pause this line of conversation and consulted with Professor Wu Yong. The cold and calculative professor had to admit that the Liao Emperor was right, and the rational course of action was to defect. No, Song Jiang just couldn't accept this. But still, he didn't know what was the right path ahead. He needed some sort of guidance, so he went to see Gongsun Seng's Taoist master who was nearby. The old sage could not tell him what to do. However, he gave Song Jiang a cryptic advice that may help him. The loyal are few, the righteous rare. Success in yen, but the moon's light is dim. When winter starts, the flock of geese will disperse. Starting from Wu, ending in Cu, official fortune is returned. Song Jiang didn't get it. This message was never fully explained, but there are a few different theories about its meaning, and we may get to that later. Anyway, not long after, the Khitan envoy received a message from Song Jiang announcing his defection. As Song Jiang entered their fortress, it turned out to be a ruse. Song Jiang attacked the Khitans and dealt them a major defeat. Song Jiang had made his mind. He is going to throw his lot with his own country, then stay loyal, like the perfect Confucian hero. The rest of the campaign was challenging, but not too tough for our heroes. When the Khitans pulled out their secret weapon, the Wuxing Five Faces formation, the mystic lady of the Ninth Heaven instructed Song Jiang on how to counter it, and the Khitan invaders were soundly defeated. The Liao Emperor then begged for forgiveness and proposed a treaty to offer tribute and promise to never invade Song again. The Song Emperor was advised by his minister that, historically, it had never been their ancestors' policy to annihilate the barbarians. It would be beneficial for the Khitans to serve as a buffer state for the Song Empire. Thus, the Song Emperor exhibited his benevolence by signing the treaty. This is actually a wish fulfillment fiction, because this treaty never happened, and historically, the Song dynasty was really weak during this period. They couldn't even beat the Khitans, who were quite unorganized during this time. Conversely, the small but rising Jurchen tribe, which would eventually found the Qing dynasty, were steamrolling the Khitans in the north. With this campaign successfully completed, Song Jiang used his downtime to visit the Buddhist abbots at Mount Wutai, Lu Zhishen's original master, seeking guidance. The Buddhists believe that life is suffering. Nevertheless, the abbots gave Song Jiang another cryptic advice about his future. When the wild geese are in the wind, their shadows falter. Reunion in the east is out of reach. Take aim and all will be achieved. At Twin Forest, fortune is all attained. To Lu Zhishen, he gave a more practical but similarly cryptic advice. Meet Xia, take prisoner. Find La, make an arrest. Hear the tides and come around. See a trusted one and be silent. Before Song Jiang returned to the court to report his victory, he decided to do some side quests. He will take down the rebel leaders Tian Hu and Wang Qing. Marshal Su Yuanjing gave them the approval, and off they went. This two arc about them fighting Tian Hu and Wang Qing only exist in Water Margin versions that go over 100 chapters, such as the 120 chapters version which I'm basing this series on. As I've discussed in a previous video, the authorship of Water Margin is subject to vigorous debate. Classic scholars such as Jing Sentan argue that chapter 1 to 71 were written by Si Nai'an, and the rest was written by his apprentice Luo Guanzong, who eventually became the author of Romance of the Three Kingdoms. But the chapters where they fight Tian Hu and Wang Qing felt even more out of place. The protagonist's personality fell flat. There are no significant character developments, and any developments were nullified by the end of these chapters. They feel like very obvious filler chapters used to extend the 108 stars feel-good winning streak. If you take out these chapters and stitch the rest back together, you will get precisely 100 chapters, and you won't even notice the difference. Anyway, I will still give you the rough outline of these two arcs. As usual, Song Jiang would fight his enemies using formation, deception, magic, and his specialty, embedding sleeper agents. So his campaigns do get a bit repetitive after a while. But the difference about his Tianhu campaign is that Gong Sun Seng actually used his magic for offensive purposes. He summoned dragons and exploding them into clay shrapnels at his enemies. They also recruited the enemy's wizards and warrior woman, who ended up marrying Zhang Qing, the stone slinger. On the Wang Qing campaign, the campaign is actually seen from the comedic perspective of the bumbling Wang Qing, a style that is very out of place compared to the rest of the novel. By the end of this arc, the new recruits leaves and Zhang Qing's warrior brides stayed at home and never appeared on page again. Actually, you can just ignore these filler chapters and imagine that the band had just finished visiting the abbot. On his way to report to the palace, Song Jiang saw Yan Qing hunting geese. His every shot hit his prey, and somehow, when he saw the geese fall one by one, Song Jiang just couldn't help but to lecture Yan Qing. When he saw the geese fall, it felt a lot like losing one of their own. After Song Jiang returned to the capital and Wang Qing was executed, he received a dreadful news. Gong Sun Seng requested to leave to go back to his master and look after his mother. Song Jiang tried to persuade him to stay, but he just couldn't. So, with heavy heart, he bid his old friend goodbye. It is winter time. Like most classical Chinese stories, Water Margin also ends with a long downward arc of tragedy. So you better prepare your hankies, because this roller coaster is going down. On New Year's Day, dissatisfaction started to spread among the band. Not only that they hadn't been rewarded with official posts for their victory, they were barred from joining the celebration in the capital. They are being treated like dirt. They might as well rebel, they told the professor. When Song Jiang heard this, he quickly used his silver tongue to pacify his men. To keep his idle men from stirring up trouble, he proposed that they join the campaign against the rebel leader Fang. The emperor approved of Song Jiang's request and promised more rewards when they return. And by the way, the emperor requested to have the craftsman Qin Dynasty and vet Huang Fuduan transferred to the palace. Obviously, Song Jiang can't refuse it. Then there are more requests by other officials for his other band members. By the time they march against Fang La, a total of 5 stars have left Song Jiang. Now, Fang La is nothing like the other rebels. He was based on a historical person, but the details here are mostly fictional. In the novel, he had seen omens. Originally a woodcutter, he saw a reflection of himself dressed in emperor's clothing in the river. After he started his rebellion, remarkable individuals started to join his cause and became an alternate version of what Song Jiang could have become had he chosen to rebel instead. This fight is a mirror match. Fang La's rebels are tough. Even on their first line of defense, Runzhou City, they took the lives of 3 stars of destiny. They were unceremoniously killed by arrows and trampled by horses. After taking that city, Song Jiang had to split his army into 2 divisions, led by himself and Lu Jingyi, to capture 2 strategic points at the same time. During this time, however, Yang Zi fell sick. He had to be left in a nearby town, and they would discover that he did not survive from his illness later. As they advanced, our band of brothers found their challenge to be growing exponentially harder. The enemy commander, Gao Keli, took down 2 of the stars before he was killed himself. Why? Why is this happening? Had the heavens abandoned us? When Song Jiang received report from Lu Jingyi's division, he learned that 3 more stars had fallen. Song Jiang fell unconscious. For unknown reason, the mystic lady of the 9th heaven never appeared to him again in this campaign. Maybe he was abandoned after all. Look, it is too much work if I count every death that happened. You just need to know that people are dying left and right, and every loss dealt a blow to poor Song Jiang's heart. He doubted that this campaign would succeed, but the professor pulled him back together. No, Song Jiang was not about to give up yet. He is going to stay committed to take down Fang La and lay out a long and elaborate trap for his enemy. The process of getting to Fang La's stronghold, however, was torturous, and the paths ahead were full of dangers. Luckily for him, everyone pulled together to pitch in, even beyond death. Zhang Sun, who was killed on a mission, possessed his brother Zhang Heng to complete it. Later, Lu Zhiseng faced off against Fang La's warrior monk, who was just as strong as he was, and he had to be saved by Wu Song. After the monk was defeated, Fang La finally pulled out his big guns and sent out his sorcerers, Demon Lord Zheng and Bao Daoyi. The husband and wife team, Wang Ying and Hu Sanyang, became fodder to the giant spirit the Demon Lord summoned and his magical weapon. In that critical battle, Wu Song's arm was severed by Bao Daoyi's flying sword, and Lu Zhiseng went missing in action as he pursued an enemy general named Xiahou into the forest. As the enemy's magical dark cloud closed in on Song Jiang, he thought that everything was over for him, until he was miraculously saved by a local spirit. A massive downgrade from the Mystic Lady. The spirit, however, foretold that Fang La would fall within the next 10 days, which lifted Song Jiang's spirit, and he was able to continue the battle the next day, despite this massive defeat. Without Gong Sun Seng to dispel the enemy magic, Song Jiang had to rely on his heavenly books and Fan Rui to counter the Demon Lord's magic. They combined their power to conjure a guardian spirit out of Guan Seng and had a spectral kaiju fight with the Demon Lord. As the Demon Lord's sentinel was pushed back, Guan Seng took the opportunity to rush in and split his faltering enemy into two. Angered by this, the second sorcerer, Bao Daoyi, rose up, and boom! He was taken out by a cannonball. His magic was no match for Song Jiang's cunning and science. After wiping out his enemy, Song Jiang approached Fang La's final base. Fang La was getting desperate, but he still had one final secret weapon on his side. His greatest general of all will annihilate Song Jiang and his goons. Ha ha ha! The tide had suddenly turned to Song Jiang's advantage, because that general was actually Cai Jing, who had gone undercover working for Fang La. When Cai Jing suddenly switched sides against Fang La at the most crucial moment, the rebel army was paralyzed and they were easily wiped out. Defiant science or not, Fang La still fell victim to Song Jiang's specialty. However, after Fang La's base was razed, they discovered that Fang La himself was nowhere to be found. That's because he had fled the city using a hidden path. When he thought that it was safe, suddenly a big fat monk pounced on him and tied him up. It was Lu Zhiseng. The prophecy had come true. Pursuing Xiahou led him to arresting Fang La. Song Jiang and the stars completed the campaign gloriously, at a great cost, because now only 36 stars were left. But the attrition continued nonetheless. Lu Zhiseng fulfilled the rest of his prophecy and became silent. He found enlightenment and died in his meditation. Wu Song, now crippled, donated all his rewards to the monastery and became a real monk, dying at the age of 80. Ling Cong was struck by paralysis and died 6 months later. Yan Qing, on the other hand, decided to leave and go into hiding. When his master Lu Junyi asked him why, he mentioned that the faithful ministers and generals of the past were rewarded with disgrace and death for their service, and the wise thing to do is to quit while they are ahead. By the time Song Jiang reached the capital, only 27 of them remained in the band. This time, they are all given the appropriate ranks and financial rewards for their contribution. But their gains did not last long, as slanders and accidents took their lives. The 4 evil ministers obviously couldn't stand seeing their enemies happy, so they invited Lu Junyi to an imperial banquet and poisoned his wine. he died on his way home. As for Song Jiang, they delivered him a bottle of poisoned imperial wine, and he had to drink it because he could not refuse an imperial gift. As the slow-acting poison took effect, Song Jiang realized that his time had come, and he called for an old friend to come over. I think we should revisit the cryptic messages left by the Taoist sage and Buddhist abbot. These messages are not properly explained in the book, but I interpret them as warnings of his impending doom. When the mystic lady told them that their task is to defend the land from external and internal threats, was Fang the internal threat, or was it really the officials? Did Song Jiang made a mistake? This novel leaves us with a lot of clues which it never clarified. Maybe Song Jiang should have taken the advice from the message and left like Yanqing. When Li Kui arrived, Song Jiang asked his faithful old friend what would he do if the emperor wanted him to die.
Obviously, start a rebellion!
Li Kui answered. So Song Jiang poured him a cup of wine and had him drink it. He then apologized to Li Kui because he could not let him destroy his legacy by starting a rebellion in his name. Even if the emperor had let him down, he could not betray the emperor and ruin his hard-earned reputation. Li Kui was shocked by this confession, but accepted his fate quietly. Well, I have served you in life, so let me serve you in death as well. He was later buried next to Song Jiang. When Wu Yong and Hua Rong heard of this news, they rushed to their graves and in their despair hung themselves to join their brothers. Not long after, the emperor had a dream, where Song Jiang and the other stars told him of the corrupt minister's treachery. When the emperor woke up, he investigated the affair, but those sly and corrupt officials got away with their excuses again. Yep, the bad guys won. If it is any consolation, I will just let you know that, historically, the Northern Song dynasty will come to an end soon. The Jurchens would later capture Emperor Huizong and his sons and humiliate them. I covered this history in a previous video. So, was Song Jiang's story a tale of heroism or a cautionary tale intended to warn people of blind loyalty and preoccupation with fame? Despite the downer ending, what makes Water Margin such a great piece of literature is that the ending really makes you think. There are so many narrative threads and breadcrumbs here. You can weave it into any message depending on your own interpretation. So what do you think is the message here, if there is any? Feel free to comment below. The fact is, even ancient scholars from China and Japan constantly debated about the contents and meaning of this novel. Not everyone liked the ending. Japanese author Kyokute Bakin, for example, disliked the whole redemption arc. So when he was inspired to write his own story, he made his character good from the beginning. That work was called Nanto Satomi Hakenden, which became a very important Japanese classic. Water Margin started a literary boom in Edo period Japan, and a lot of writers wrote their stories modeled around Water Margin. I think this is because the story of a band of outcasts, misunderstood by society, forced to extreme ends, and their quest for redemption is not a uniquely Chinese story. It is a universal human story that resonates with all who had experienced injustice in their lives. If you are inspired by this story, maybe you should write your own Water Margin. You know, I think the anti-establishment theme could already make it be easily adaptable to a cyberpunk reimagining. But maybe you've got other ideas. And I am curious to know, what would your Water Margin look like? If you are still watching this, thank you all for sticking all the way to the end. Our channel have lots of great videos on the history and culture of East Asia, so be sure to subscribe to get more. Also, remember that we've got great t-shirts and merch you can get to support the channel. Before I go, I would like to thank our patrons at Patreon and other contributors for making this series possible. Until next time, stay cool, my bros.